Hey, so welcome to Randy's Legacy Cafe. I'm your host, Dead Meme Frog, and I'm joined by Tideyfattey007. And just to clear the record, since this man was mauling at me, like, before we even started the show, yes, you are a co-host. Just because I said I'm your host, Dead Meme Frog, does not mean you're not a co-host. You stupid gay. I just wanted to do something like this. It was his idea, by the way. But I just wanted to do something like this because, it can get kind of tiring just talking about, like, the latest YouTube drama. Like, that's just, it's a big mess. And,
Plus, I get along really well with him.
yeah, he does.
Also, so I'm not gonna lie, for the past 20 minutes that we've been like just on our pre-podcast conversation, for whatever reason, my dumb functioning brain is not able to come up with a clever comeback to that, even though I knew that you were gonna use that insult. So I'm just gonna revert to one of our normal ones. You're a fag blaster 3000.
I feel like nobody's gonna get that joke except for us.
I know, but you know what? Inside, that's the point of an inside joke. Sometimes they suck and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, so like I said, I wanted to do something different from commentary. So if you wanted to see, Call Me Carson got canceled or some stupid stuff like that. If you wanted to see me talk about that, just leave the podcast now. Uh,
Yeah, we're gonna switch from commentary about the latest bullshit with uh, YouTube, so we can switch to commentary about horror movies.
yeah, which brings me to the horror movie we're talking about today, The Invisible Man.
Yes, this is a really interesting one.
Yeah, honestly, probably one of the best horror movies that came out last year. Though then again, I don't know how many came out last year, so
Not
it's kind of
many,
hard to say.
not many. I will say though, it is kind of a crown jewel of 2020 movies because not only it did come out before the whole pandemic crap, but also it came out, it was one of the few that came out during that time and like was actually big enough to actually catch the eyes of the mainstream, at least that I was able to find.
Yeah,
And that's
and
really saying something because I live under a rock.
yeah. Can I just say something? The trailers for this movie were absolutely awful. Whenever I first saw those, I was like, alright, I'm going to hate this movie. Like, I literally
Really?
thought I was going to hate it when I saw those trailers.
Well, I will say this much, which I didn't see the trailers, but I will say this. Horror movies tend to go for the scenes, at least trailer wise, or the scenes that create the most suspense, or either that or they'll go for like the more jump scare type moments, especially like when they did with the trailer for The Strangers, where
Yeah,
they're like, leave us alone, but we only just started. But you can't really do that with a movie like The Invisible Man because pretty much the only movements or moments rather like that, you have to have the context. Otherwise, you're just looking at a semi-hot blonde girl scream at nothing.
yeah. The the freaking trailers made it look like a shitty supernatural movie,
Right.
which
Which,
that's
by the
that's
way,
not what it is.
no, it is far from it. But by the way, I will make this note. I am so glad they didn't go for the supernatural route because it's one of the horror genre has been able to ruin so many things, and one this is like this will never be farther from an exception. How badly the horror genre has screwed up anything to do with like the supernatural genre, and how convoluted it's made it at the same time.
Yeah.
Like that's a major. It's so that's such a screw up. It's an achievement in of itself that it's a screw up of that level to make it both like convoluted and just overused as it is.
It's an achievement for sure. Like, how do you make it that convoluted?
I don't know the convoluted part isn't really all that hard, at least in my mind, because specifically because there's so little that we do actually know about the supernatural, especially for like the general populace deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The part that was really shocking for me was how they're able to do that simultaneously, specifically simultaneously, with the whole, like, with being able to overuse it as much. Like that. That was just mind blowing to me.
Yeah. I think something that I'd like to compare the like there was also the original Invisible Man, right, from like 1933 and stuff like that. And thing is, I was watching that one back and I was like that one also did not go for the supernatural thing, which I did like, but also the
Right.
explanation in it, which was like, oh, just a few chemicals is all, like, just for like how he got invisible and stuff like that, was just kind of, it was kind of because it's like it's not like this happened on accident. He was literally trying to be invisible for years in the original
Right.
movie.
Yeah.
So it's just, I wish there was a
That
bit
was
of a
like the
better
life.
explanation, but then again, it's like that movie was also really good. So it's
Well,
like,
for one, even to this day, what can you do outside of just a few chemicals? Outside of, well, obviously with what Lee Whannell ended up managed to do, but like especially focus on at the time as well, the 1930s. They're freaking. What could you really do outside of that? You know, they had so little technological. You know, technology-wise, it was just a wasteland in the 1930s.
I mean, you're right.
At
You're
least
right.
compared to these days, you know. Because now, like, we're so advanced now, we can basically laugh at them from being like, you didn't think to make a suit that creates so many pictures that you can actually propel whatever the environment looks like around you with several thousand pictures per second.
Yeah. I think it's more to have to do that the whole thing just aged a bit poorly.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I
that's
mean,
more what happened.
to be fair, most of any movies except for slasher movies with really big tits on it, uh, like from the point I worded, the timing on that was so terrible on that joke.
It's
But
alright.
from any movie, basically any movie from 1970 and before didn't age well. And then even then, any movie like before, let's just say 2000, essentially, did not age well either, unless it was a slasher horror flick that had a bunch of really hot girls with big tits. And even then, one of the biggest examples of that wouldn't doesn't even really fit that criteria because Laurie Strode, the actor that played Laurie Strode, I swear to God, this is probably the only time that I've ever forgotten the girl's name now
Jamie
that
Lee
I
Curtis?
am. Yes, thank you, Jamie Lee Curtis. um, because to be fair, Jamie Lee Curtis, we can pretty much argue her fandom in the horror genre basically started off of Halloween. And even then, she didn't start off with big tits. Much like Randy pointed out in the original Scream, that didn't really come into play until she got a lot more famous, and then she had breast implants and started showing them.
Damn.
Which, I mean, part of that is, part of that is just simply cinematics, but there is at least some idea of truth to that. And I love how we start talking about the Invisible Man, and then within less than 5 minutes, we somehow managed to connect it to Jamie Lee Curtis's tits before she had breast implants. This is amazing.
Amazing start to a podcast. Amazing
Yes,
start.
indeed, indeed. So, I know this is completely useless to start to say this now, but I think we've pretty much gone past the point of professionalism here. Shall I start reading from the note ideas?
Sure, man.
Okay, so the biggest thing, which this doesn't have a whole lot to do with the movie. Aside from that, I got this from the DVD itself. The first preview of the DVD was, it has a funny story in that. The original movie I meant to cover back when I was actually planning to do this on my own The original movie I was going to cover was The Hunt, except I really hate watching that movie on my own, like I do most movies. So I ended up deciding on The Invisible Man. Well, the funniest little thing, The Hunt is actually literally the first preview on the DVD for Invisible Man.
Okay, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I know, right? That's like the galaxy interfered there and was like, okay, yeah, this is what you're gonna be reminded of your decisions.
Yep. Yep.
Don't know if it was good or bad, but I got reminded. But so the biggest thing is the biggest thing I liked about like the start of the movie was the way that he was able to start the tone so well just within the first like 30 seconds of the movie. Because I remember I ended up watching the commentators, or the director's commentary, rather. And I remember he went on something like a 10-minute rant about specifically the opening scene. Because apparently it took them something like a couple weeks to actually get the scene, because the way they had to do it. I don't know, did you see the opening scene? Because I know
Uh,
there's bits and pieces you didn't get to see.
I don't really remember it all that much.
Okay, so the very opening scene starts off. You remember how Adrian's house was on almost like an overhanging cliff type deal?
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, so the like at the bottom of the cliff, it literally looked like a place that someone would land and die from the impact of the rocks, like on a freaking Scooby Doo era movie.
Yeah.
And they had the words. It was a picture, and it just opened up, showing a really large, jagged rock, and with a bunch of waves kind of just going against the rock. And then Lee Winnell, which I'm probably butchering the hell out of his name, but honestly, what American doesn't do that to an Australian name? So, uh, so he said the biggest issue with the shot was because all of that was done in real time, like the actual recording. So the biggest issue was they needed to record enough footage to where they could get a shot of the waves actually getting big enough to go over, like, basically drown the jagged rock. And that was an issue because it was actually pretty tall. Like, he was a lot taller than it's portrayed in the actual, like, after editing footage. So they had to wait until they could record that. And for one, apparently it was nearly impossible. Like, according to one now, that was one of the hardest shots they actually managed to get. Plus, it took something like a couple weeks, if I remember correct. And they basically just added it in to where, like, as that wave was subsiding, rather not subsiding, the Invisible Man words would slowly appear as the wave was subsiding.
Yeah.
So I like just that within itself. Plus, you could hear the seagulls going around, and it was the perfect tone setter for the thing. I thought I thought that was a really amazing way to kind of start off the conversation, just to kind of you don't small things like it really is a small thing, but small things like that don't ever really get, at least I feel, enough focus. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, you know The Shining, right? Like the intro to
Hmm.
that,
Right.
like just the music, the shotting, just like like the shooting, like just the framing of the whole shot, just everything is just it actually aligns perfectly. And maybe that's just because it was made by Stanley Kubrick, but
Right.
I thought it was like an amazing way to actually start off the film.
Right. I totally agree. Plus, I mean, But also at the same time, what do you expect from such a respected director as well? You know, I mean, the guy was so meticulous. He's reported to have made the actors do something like what 200 takes on average.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, that shows a lot of, especially even, especially when you're even making Nicholson do that. An actor as perfect as Jack Nicholson. That's basically telling Adam Sandler, hey, you just told your best joke of your whole career. You're going to do it 200 times over because I think you can do it better. But the guy actually cared enough about his job and the movie to be like, you know what, I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
um,
Dude, Jack Nicholson's a great actor.
yes, he totally is. They I love it, especially ironically. I loved his work in anger management with Adam Sandler. That was a really good movie.
Oh my god, he was in a movie called Anger Management, then you just go back to The Shining.
Right. Well, actually, I'm not sure, but I think The Shining was before anger management. I'm not completely sure.
No, I just find that very funny because you just see The Shining, a movie about Jack Torrance just going around murdering his family and just being insane, like
Right.
after having to stay at the Overlook Hotel, right? And
Mm,
then you just see anger management as if he has to get his anger managed after he managed to kill his entire family.
right.
Like I just find it funny.
Absolutely. You know, I will say this, and I mean, obviously, he does so great, Liwa now, on going back to the movie we're actually talking about. the excuse me, sorry, I had to burp. Um, Lee Now, the director, does so amazing at creating the tone, but I think, and I do genuinely believe this could be attributed to his admitted, not noobidness, if that's not even a word, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think this can be attributed to the fact that he's so young as a director. I genuinely do. But there's a couple times where he kind of sets the tone so well that he kind of he lets the tone be born at a cost for the storytelling to the movie, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense.
Like, I don't know, like, I have a couple examples, but are there any that you can think of before I give off mine? Like, is there anything of that nature that you noticed?
I can't really think of
Or,
it, but it's probably there.
well, one particular thing that, like, one thing that I noticed as an example was I don't see how um, Adrian would have been able to convince the state that he faked his suicide. At least that I don't believe that he would have been convincing enough to where the state would have allowed for his will to be carried out. And I'm not saying that's not possible. It's happened before, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more detail on specifically how. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they did have a scene, which I'm gonna say this completely ironically. Spoiler alert. Later, later on into the movie, they did have a scene where they're talking about like it was essentially the dad of the girl. I'm gonna refer to him as the dad because I can't ever remember the guy's name. But the dad basically just had a really, I don't know a word that represents the opposite of convoluted, but it's just a really rushed and gone through explanation, at least in my opinion, where he's like, yeah, the guy's, Adrian's brother basically did all of it, and Adrian's the victim, at least officially. And like, that's not enough, you know? Like, I need a little bit more, specifically for the storytelling side of it, you know? Because this is the main point of a movie, is to tell a story, you know?
Yeah. And obviously, I get
Which, I mean, it can
I
obviously...
get the point of like the law and all that. Them saying, oh, only one of them was doing it. Though then again, it's
Right.
like I think it's clear to see like in the actual movie, it was both of them doing it. Like,
Right.
it wasn't just one person.
I will say that I will say this, like looking back at it, it's kind of like the Scream type mentality, which by the way, you bet your asses that yes, that is going to be covered.
Yeah.
But I just broke the fourth wall. I think I just broke a big rule. But
How do you
um,
break the fourth wall on a podcast?
I don't know. Maybe we should cut that out.
No, I'm keeping that in. I'm keeping that in.
Fuck you. But no, the it's kind of like a Scream type feeling because my first time watching it, I genuinely did not see that coming. Like there were, and that's the thing, there were even a couple times where I was like, dude, I don't see where one person would have managed to do that, you know? Like I didn't really think of it that way, and I guess that was kind of the reason why I didn't think to say, hey, maybe there are two people in here, because I didn't think of it as in how could one person do that. I rather looked at it as how did Adrian be able to rush all the way, you know what I mean? Rush that fast.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think I think that was the main issue was basically like I was trying to speculate, but the premise of my speculation had basically already accepted that hey, there is one person, you know.
Yeah.
Which I mean, there is an argument to be made that the there is an argument to be made that to be fair, the Adrian's brother was the lawyer of his estate and handled all of his affairs and whatnot. So, why would the state of California not believe that, especially when he had pictures of the supposed suicide? But, I mean, even then, it kind of okay. BT Dubs, I'm gonna have to take a bit of a long pause so I can read these notes because I can't remember exactly what it was I was trying to like say.
Yeah. Yeah. Go
So,
ahead, man. Go ahead.
all right, cool.
We don't want this podcast to turn into a total train wreck.
Yeah, no kidding. That's why I think you could probably even tell, like, I was starting to kind of struggle for words.
I mean, you've explained things very well so far.
I thought so too. Thank you. I think I was doing pretty well, especially for my first podcast.
Yeah.
However, we do not know. So,
It's probably like 30% me talking and 70% you talking because I'm like, waiting for us to go through the film that I'll give my insight on it.
right. By the way, I wanted to ask that too while I have the chance. Like, I'm not dominating it, am I?
No, you're not.
Okay, cool.
I know that I have the opportunity to come in and speak about anything.
Right. Yeah. I already do know this because there's.
Are you being
Yeah, I'm just kind of remember exactly what I said. I see exactly what I was taking over to employer that Dave was in a second. You know, it was not. It was
okay.
I don't know what it's
Okay. No, sorry, I'm not trying to rush you.
yeah, that's fine. I didn't think it's like every time I was like still half invested in reading. Okay, so it's in seconds.
Hey, by the way, I don't know if you're gonna believe this, but we've been going on for almost 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah. Like, seriously, I thought like I knew it was a while, but I didn't know if I thought it was a bit. I thought it was closer to like 20 minutes.
Well, it's 25 minutes.
Yeah, fair enough.
So you weren't
Yo.
too far off.
So
You know what? A cool thing I might do with that, I might just like speed up the sound of you just flipping through your little, reading your notes.
so it'd be kind of like almost like that somewhat of a gag thing that some podcasts do, where it's like
Yeah, something
really
like that. It would
high-pitched
sound
thing.
like that. It would sound like that.
And then like the really high pitched tone to it, just to make it sound really stupid,
Yeah. Yeah.
or even more stupid rather. Okay, so
I feel like this whole
obvious-
podcast is just gonna be me saying yeah.
Probably at least until the end, because I feel like that's more or less. To be fair, because to be fair, we did say we wanted this to be like as natural to our normal conversation. Well, that is most of our normal conversation. Usually, I'll kind of like make an observation or something, and you'll just kind of like tap back with something.
Yeah. Oh, there I go saying yeah again.
Yeah. Okay, motherfucker. If we keep going like
Well, I
this,
like
it's
being
gonna be so
self-aware
much.
about stuff. It makes things funnier.
It really does too. It does, dude. If we keep freaking, if we go at this pace with the pauses, there's going to be so much to edit.
All right, let's keep going.
Oh, that's it. Anyway, uh, so that was one thing. There is definitely a case to be made as far as to say, well, he was the brother, and also more importantly, the lawyer for Adrian's estate has financed basically everything except criminal defense, which, I mean, even then, possibly he could have been because he was still somewhat kind of a defense lawyer for the main character when she got put into that psychiatric ward, somewhat.
Yeah.
But even still, there is an argument to be made with that, but we still don't really know that for sure because that, again, still kind of goes into the lack of storytelling type deal because we don't know if there was any kind of, we don't even know if there was an investigation into his death, at least on behalf of the state or whatever else.
Yeah, but that's the weird
Which,
thing. If you think there would be if there would be an investigation of the death and stuff like that, wouldn't you think that like the police or someone like that would come to verify the body? It wouldn't just
right.
be like an attorney on behalf of him.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, somewhat of a small plot hole, but I'm not even sure if it is or not. But this is just like pure speculation, um, for lack of better words. And I don't know this for sure. Like I said, make that very clear. But from what I'm understanding, the body does have to be verified not only by the police, but more vigorously, they have to be verified as dead. Like they have to go through the burial process, which in order to be buried, they have to be prepped by the mortician. So no matter what, like I'm not gonna lie, when I was making that argument, I did kind of have the idea to be like, well, they make fake bodies that look real all the time in movies, but even still, you know what I mean? Like there's a bit of issue with all that. And
Yeah.
much like with what I'm saying as a whole, these are very extremely small details, but mind you, these are also relevant to the point. And mind you, these small details are things that made the quote unquote horror goats, the horror goats, since we're also really big into rap, the horror goats, especially the original Scream, because that was before they really had any major studio intervention or leaks of the scripts, where Wes Craven was able to put a lot of focus, even to things as small as which hand the character used to portray the killing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was one thing that I kind of noticed, which also, this is a bit of a like mini tangent, but on the topic of many details, I do not believe for one freaking minute that the state of California did not tax an inheritance of more than $5 million, when in reality 12% citizens just on income tax, if I'm not mistaken, are taxed over 12%. I know for sure it's at least 10%. And
Yeah.
mind you, that's not accounting for federal taxes and the three other things that California taxes.
Yeah. If we're going back to like the whole investigation thing, like why they wouldn't investigate that stuff, uh, it
Right.
it kind of just makes me think that the characters of this movie are kind of living in like a Truman Show type world. Like if they were able to like let that type of stuff like happen in that movie, like it seems like a
Right.
perfect scenario for like the police to just be like, suicides happen all the time. We're not going to investigate this.
Right. And I mean, this will probably be the last point I make as far like after this point I'll probably dead my piece as far as like that small detail thing. But the that was another thing. The whole ordeal about I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot what the fuck I was gonna say.
I just mentioned what I was going to say because I love the Truman Show.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Can you repeat what you were gonna say? I think it because that's what I got the idea from.
Yeah, so basically it was just like they barely investigated the suicide stuff, which obviously in a real world,
Right.
like they would investigate that stuff. And if we're going back to like the idea of the Truman Show, the movie,
Mm-hmm.
no real society would actually let the stuff that happened in that movie happen. Like who would let a 24-hour
Yeah.
environment with a guy that's constantly being lied to his entire life and is being
Right.
broadcasted to billions of people every single day? Who would let that happen?
Yeah. True. Um. Okay. So yes, I do remember what I was gonna say. What I was gonna say specifically when you're talking about a suicide, I feel like in reality they would give a way more vigorous like verification test obviously on the police side, but especially on the mortician side too. And mind you, I am still basing my assumption, all of these assumptions, on the premise that a mortician they would do at least do an autopsy of the body to like verify the way of death before they would be like, okay, let's handle the inheritance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
At least, which, as far as when to handle the inheritance, I don't think there's anything set in stone legally, but I think it's more or less like a general consensus that they usually handle. I don't know if you,
I am
Mr.
not cutting
Garrison.
that out. I am not cutting that out.
Dude, no, we need to freaking keep that in.
All right.
Like, I feel like the suicide would have been talked about. Okay, small tangent. Should I leave my notification sound on just in case, or like, should that just be a one-time thing?
You can leave it on. I don't care, man.
Okay. But
I'm also leaving you asking me that in.
okay, that'll be fun. Screw it, whatever. But so anyway, that was my main like or my last rather point on the whole concept of the small details was the the idea that I'm sure they would have not only would have vigorously investigated it like the police often do, but they would have even more vigor, especially with a especially strong vigor. They would have been like, "Hey, let's really look into this to make sure that it's a suicide."
Yeah.
Because I mean, it makes sense that they would do that, you know. But
Yeah,
that was the
as
main
much as I
thing.
like the Invisible Man, plot holes like that are just like kind of. Then again, I don't know how they would have handled a fake suicide scene better. If I'm
Well,
like, it's kind of complicated. Scenes like that are like hard to get perfect. Then again,
well,
like
I mean,
there are a lot of things that go into that shit. Obviously,
right,
I don't make movies. I couldn't do that perfect.
right. Well, I mean, there are. I mean, for one, let's acknowledge that there are people that are genuinely dumb enough to be like, "Oh, you can slow your heartbeat down, slow it just just in perfect timing to where people can check your pulse and think you're dead." By the way, maybe even you wouldn't get that. That is a direct reference to when Dead Meat James pointed that out during the Scream ranking video for
Yeah.
Scream 3. Like, just a bit of a shout out for that because I, just like him, I think that was so stupid. But
Yeah, and I also saw people trying to claim in that kill count, like the comments, like, "Oh, he could have put like an exercise ball or something like that in his armpit."
yeah, yeah, it was something really dumb like that.
Like even that, just maybe it would have slowed it down. I don't think it would have made it stop.
Right, absolutely.
Well,
But
I've never tried putting a little like stress ball, whatever that thing is, under my armpit, so
right.
I don't know if it would like hide the pulse or not.
Well, also, who in the balls would actually think for one, who carries one around like that except for really neurotic people? Like, were we still on the like vigorous investigation into suicide?
Pretty sure we were.
Okay. Yeah, that was the biggest thing with all that. Frankly, I think to be completely honest, I think we can just shave off the tail end of that and just skip on to the next thing, if I'm honest.
So you
Because
want
if
to
I'm
skip
not,
on to the next thing?
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because for one, the tangent that we were like on at the time, I think it only lasted for what, like 20 seconds before it got interrupted.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be too terribly hard to kind of like just shave that off, should it?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Hold on. My the next thing the next thing that I had to say, uh not necessarily, I mean kind of the opening scene. It was when they started to show her with laying in bed with Adrian, and like he had just woken up, or just went to sleep rather. And because like I don't know, before this particular viewing that I did to like prepare for the podcast, I would have I anytime before that I would have complained that it broke the rule of like not showing any type of nudity, because you got to admit, specifically for a horror movie, which honestly, personally, I think that that rule is starting to slowly but surely die out, at least in the modern age.
Horror movie rules in general is starting to die out. Like,
Well, yeah, but that's really only because of bullshit feminism.
yeah, it's just like
But I don't know.
like in general, you just see a lot of movies.
Right,
There are movies like there was Cabin in the Woods, which kind of made fun of like all the horror movie stuff.
right. I mean, yeah, but also mind you, that is also back in what I think that was released. Well, it was released in 2012, but it was actually like recorded back in like the late 2000s, actually.
Yeah.
But
But by the way,
but
can I just say I do love Cabin in the Woods. Anyways, let's continue.
last note on Cabin in the Woods, haven't watched it, do plan to watch it.
You should watch it. It's a good movie.
If it were in hopefully in an ideal world, which hopefully it will be an ideal world in this case, hopefully like my first time watching it can be along with you, because I think that would be really cool for the both of us to like analyze it the first time I watch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so getting off the tangent, um, onto another tangent. The the whole thing about like the lack of nudity in it, or at least the perceived lack of nudity in it, I realized wasn't really even much of an issue, particularly because of the beginning scene where she's getting out of bed. I noticed that there's so much freaking, and by the way, it was enough to where I noticed without even trying to look for it. But the the amount that of like, I don't want to say side boob because it wasn't necessarily side boob, but like just the amount of her breast that they actually showed was like, okay, I could see where that would actually fulfill the rule, technically speaking, because even though like it wasn't enough for it to be vulgar, but it was also enough to be like that could possibly unintentionally fulfill that agenda without really even meaning to, specifically for the low standards that they would have for a movie with such a tone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like how we talked about I like how we talked about the whole fake suicide thing, and now we're talking about side boob.
Yeah, I know, right? The one thing in this world that makes you not want to kill yourself. But no, and by the way, I don't know, I feel like that's a really contrived, for lack of a better word, because I'm tired of how many times I've said convoluted, so I think that still kind of works. But just for how complex of a concept I just explained, I feel like I need to kind of use an example just to make it more comprehensible. Take for example the take for example, I don't know, the have you ever watched the movie The Birthday Killer?
I think I've No, 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 I haven't.
Okay. Well, I'm not shocked. It's one of the many, what do you call it? It's one of the many low budget horror movies they made back in like the 80s or whatever, when the slasher genre was really starting to kind of get its original, not when Scream revitalized it, but when it was first starting to get popular before it burned out the first time.
Yeah.
It was so, and weirdly enough, it actually was made by a feminist, but it was one of the old world type of feminists, because the guy that financed the movie, he I can't remember the guy's name, but he had an agenda in all of the movies that he put his name on, which was it had to be full of guts, like damn near Saw level type of guts, right?
Right.
It had to be full of guts. It had to be just like really vulgar, and then the biggest thing, it had to have lots and lots of nudity. Like the type of genuinely remember the 2009 Friday the 13th remake?
I barely remember that thing.
Well, I'm pretty sure everyone remembers, at least of the ones that have watched it, just how obscenely vulgar it was as far as like nudity goes.
Yeah.
And honestly, the amounts of nudity in Birthday Killer was honestly, it puts the 2009 remake to shame, if I'm honest, which really says something, dude. But actually, come to think of it, I should have just used the fucking 2009 version instead of some weird one-off movie that no one's heard of. Damn it. But anyway, we can figure that out later on. The
Yeah.
2000 kind of, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna I'm gonna use that in the example, and we'll just figure out which example to use later on. The 2009 remake had lots and lots of nudity, but also they were comfortably, for one, they were comfortable in the idea of following those horror stereotypes. But secondly, the writers even made it to where they made sure to make room for those stereotypes, you know. But with The Invisible Man, the reason why it's different is with the whole nudity thing is because it's not meant to have nudity. It's meant to be hyper focused specifically on the storyline and to have a good storyline at that, you know?
Yeah.
So, which by the way, and side note, this is completely off script, but this is something that I also thought of. The whole, like, there seems to be a really strong correlation, especially as, like, the more recent years of horror, specifically, basically anything after 2000, where it seems to be the more nudity you had, the less of a storyline you had quality wise. Because if you really think about it, it was basically the 5th Friday the 13th where they really started ramping it up like heavily with the nudity. But at the same time, that's also where the storyline started to go to complete shit.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it is also kind of hard to compare a franchise, at least when you're talking about nudity, that specific correlation. It's pretty hard to compare a franchise to a one-off movie like the Invisible Man. Then I guess you could also technically argue that that would be a franchise too, since it's a remake of an old movie.
Yeah, the
Maybe
events,
that's
the Invisible Man did have sequels and stuff like that whenever it was originally released. Though, interesting
and
thing to note, it was a different Invisible Man every single time. Like, it was not the same
really.
character.
So it was never like none of the movies actually followed the blueprint of any of the other ones.
Yeah, no, they were completely different people and completely different, like, Invisible Men. Like, I think even completely different, like, backstories on, how they became invisible and stuff like that.
So
I mainly
basically,
reference the original because that's the one where all the ideas came from. And might I
right?
just say the original has some like really good stuff like special effects wise for the 30s. Like and
Yeah,
some of that stuff
definitely.
looks kind of shoddy, but if you look at it, you're like that is impressive for back then.
Right. Well, and actually, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure this is true. I think the 1930s movie was even based off of a book, if I'm
Yeah,
not
it was based
mistaken.
off of two books. One by J.J. Wells and then or whatever that author's name was. I probably
Uh huh.
butchered that. Let me
Hey,
just.
I've
I, I have to. Yeah, I
well in the
butchered
mean
that. I butchered that.
what
That's
was
the
it then?
author's name. H.G. Wells. I'm an idiot. But
Well, to be fair,
there
the
was a
term
novel by
butchering usually refers to pronunciation anyway, so you're
yeah
kind of a cut for that.
there was a novel by H.G. Wells, The Invisible Man, and then I
Mm-hmm.
think there was one more movie which depicted the Invisible Man as like just like an evil person or something like that, and the movie depicting both
Mm-hmm.
movie sides.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the 1930s one kind of did play both sides, at least in the aspect that, like, the scientists in the 1930s a didn't necessarily have a like a very noble motive behind the whole invisible thing. At least not that I can remember. But he did kind of go from almost a protagonist to an antagonist, almost kind of like a kind of like a Macbeth type vibe, you know.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, just to have an idea, like an organic idea to help boost up the comment numbers, anyone that's watching, it'd be kind of a cool conversation starter to give your ideas if you think the Invisible Man should be considered as a franchise, like why or why not. I think that'd be a pretty cool organic conversation starter.
Yeah.
Although I will admit it's probably a lot less organic if you point out that it's organic.
Yeah. Like, oh, we
Anyway,
just want a comet farm.
yeah.
You know what? While we're at it, like the video, make sure to subscribe.
So it's a minor complaint, but I really wish the actor that played Adrian would have been portrayed a little different because he was portrayed almost kind of godly, you know, and I understand that you kind of need that type of aurora around the character. I'm probably misusing that word, but even still, it could have he could have put a little more efforts into making the character seem a little more mortal than he actually was. Like, for example, when the main character managed to break out and get into the car with her sister and he shattered that window, I'm pretty sure you at least saw that part.
I saw that part.
Yeah. So I feel like he didn't portray it very accurately because I don't, particularly when you're shoving your fist like clean through the window, like he almost punched her. I don't think that you would have had essentially no reaction to that. Like, I think even someone like me, like with my stature, because I mean, I'm built like a freaking tank. I think even someone with my stature being just absolutely Hulk pissed wouldn't be like, okay, not even acknowledging this. Even I would be like, oh, damn, that really freaking hurts. At least after a couple seconds, you know?
Yeah.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, the whole, like, the part of the scene where they drag off and everything, that's still, pun not intended, drags on.
Maybe he didn't
for,
feel it.
like,
Maybe he didn't feel it because he was on black tar heroin or something. It might have to. Dude, he might have been just on some hard drugs, right?
I mean,
it's a possibility. It's a possibility.
I mean, it's a possibility. He didn't seem the type, but yeah, kind of, maybe. It's kind of I mean, he certainly had enough money for it.
Yeah. Dude, I wonder. I wonder where his dealer is to get that good of drugs. Because whoever his dealer is, I want some.
Well, to be fair, it probably would take a long time, like, for the commute.
And I think his controller died. We're doing this through Xbox Live for context, so I think his controller died. That's funny.
Yes, it did, which I only caught the tail end of that, but yeah, well, it didn't die, my controller just randomly turned off, so I'm assuming I went too long with, like, making it move or scroll over before it did the auto turn off thing.
Yeah.
Which is really gay.
Don't worry, I'm gonna cut out the silence in it. Like, I'm gonna cut out that.
Or, if you want, maybe we can also decide to do, like, I don't know, some kind of funny caption or something. Maybe we can find a way to have fun with it. We'll figure it out later.
Yeah. Let's just move past this so we don't have to scrap this entire thing.
Yeah. So, like, the whole thing with him punching through the window of the car, that's definitely an example, but also you can't not acknowledge that, like, the authenticity that the immortal type deal kind of gives to the story. But I feel like it would have given a little more authenticity to the role as well, to portray it just with a little more mortality, especially when you consider that it doesn't even get, like, the role maybe gets half an hour of screen time rather, when like, out of this damn near 2-hour movie. Which, I mean, and again, I can see a really good reason not to add the mortality to the character, considering the whole horror aspect, or at least the scary psychological aspect of the movie, essentially completely hinges to the idea that he can give off the idea of being a god, pretty much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I don't know. It's just, I feel like there's a little bit more that could have been done, specifically for an actor that was able to play the role so as well as he did already, you know?
Yeah.
But, I don't know. That was more like, that was kind of an interesting thing. And another thing to point out too is the fact that, like, yeah, you don't really want Adrian to have too much mortality, but the counter argument to the point I just made is kind of undercut by the ending of the movie, because the whole point of the ending was to say, okay, Adrian does end up succumbing to his mortality because he gets murdered, and she makes it look like an actual suicide.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
But you
mean,
know what? To be fair, the way she handled that in the end, I think was cool.
oh yes, absolutely, and don't think I wasn't criticizing that whatsoever. Like that was just purely to say that like, hey, there's not really much of an argument to be made against the point I was saying, you know?
Yeah. Sure as well handled that better than the fake suicide in the beginning.
Yeah, no kidding, dude. It took freaking. It took me what, like 10 minutes to find all of those different loopholes,
Yeah,
and
I
like,
can't really find too much of a loophole with like her plan of doing, that suicide.
right,
Consider that,
absolutely.
she was using the suit and did that.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say this: the one big example or alternative I would say would maybe have been, especially since he's basically able to live invisibly with that suit, instead of doing the whole thing of like he committed suicide, I think it would have been more believable if it would have been him going missing because to be fair, I think there was something like 2 or 3 weeks that went on in between the time of her escaping and when the suicide happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would have been the perfect amount of time for the police to eventually be like, you know what, we're going to give up the search and we're basically going to we're going to rename it to a search body, whatever the official term is for that. Where they're like, okay, now instead of looking for a live missing person, we're going to start looking for a body.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Hey, by the way, to keep myself focused, I just started playing Tetris. Like no joke. Doing this actually helps me keep focused whenever I'm talking about stuff.
hey, I mean, hell, whatever works. Shoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I said, the main idea is just I wish there would have been a better mix because in the end, I think the end product ended up just having an overly abundant anger and psychotic type sadness, which I mean, it's not really. It can't really be used to make a counter argument, but it is at least enough to make a point, a counterpoint at best. That psychotic sadness that is something that you would often see within the a toxic relationship like that. I mean, you would especially see this. I mean, kind of reverting a bit back to the music side of things. I mean, remember back in Recovery, I think was the album when he did that song with Rihanna, and he was like, "Dude, I'm gonna freaking tie you to the bed and set this house on fire."
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Like Jesus
that
Christ. Jesus Christ.
yeah, that was. I think he was, and ironically, I think he was still on the pills for Recovery.
No, I think he went clean for Relapse.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like the last album he was on pills for was Encore.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I could have
Which
sworn
makes
he
sense.
had.
Makes sense. Encore is that's a weird album.
True.
But anyways, enough about us talking about Eminem.
Yeah, yeah. Fair enough. So, like a one-off thing, even though I'm sure we'll find something to make a 20-minute conversation out of it.
Yeah.
um, a really weird thing. Uh, in the beginning, when Celia, the main character, walks out of the house to go to that towards the mailbox to go, I think she was supposed to go and get the mail or something.
Yeah.
Uh, the way the shots were, there were a couple shots where they just like covered, like there were one or two shots where they flat out didn't really even show her. It was just straight out, like they just literally showed strictly her shoes while she was walking. And I don't know, specifically that shot, it just like it was supposed to be setting a tone. It was supposed to be setting suspense, and it was supposed to be, know, just kind of making me think in that certain type of way where that like something's about to jump out and get the character.
Yeah.
And specifically, and this wasn't the case my first time watching it, but being that I've viewed it so many times, and just on that specific viewing, probably more so because I was trying to do it in an analytical way for the podcast. It just made me start thinking about, like, I was too distracted thinking about the real life actress to actually, like, immerse myself in that tone that it was trying to set.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
get
it
where
was
you're coming
just,
from here.
but fast forward a decent amount into the movie, there's a scene which I think you would have at least, like, seen part of it. I don't know if they would have went into detail on any of the, like, trailers or any of the, like, small scene. Like, this is somewhere I feel like you probably would have had to watch the whole movie to see it,
Yeah, I've watched
because
the whole
it's
movie
not.
before, but like,
Oh, okay. I didn't know you have. Okay. Well, the part
yeah, it's
where
not like I would just do an entire episode without seeing the movie. I just haven't seen it in a little while.
I'm not gonna lie, and I kind of feel like an ass now, but I genuinely thought that's what you were doing. Anyway, so the awkward silence.
Yep.
Anyway, the scene where, like, right after Celia finds out about the suicide, the fake suicide, um, when she starts talking about, like, she finally starts to open up and get into specifics about everything that Adrian did and just how life was with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember watching the director's commentary. I can't remember exactly how long he said, but Winnell actually said that that scene was originally, because that scene only takes something like 5 or 6 minutes, right?
Right.
Well, that scene actually was originally meant to take something like between 15 and 20 minutes, but according to Lee, the actors just played the scene so well that he felt like a lot of the information was just so well conveyed that they didn't need all that extra dialogue.
Damn.
So, like, they literally went onto the set expecting to do that whole scene, or at least Winnell did, and they ended up acting it so well that he was like, you know what? We're just gonna take what you recorded there and just rip up the rest and just put it in the fire, basically.
Damn.
Which the whole time, the whole commentary, like, anytime that he's not giving one of his very many, like, tips that he's giving to anyone that might want to do directing, which I personally, that's just so heartwarming to me, just especially in times like this, to see someone like, hey, maybe someone would want to take advice, so let me give some advice for those that want to take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for whatever little time there is where he's not doing that, basically all of the rest, except for maybe like 2% of it, he's pretty much just complimenting something that was done about the cast. So like, he thinks very highly of just the work that the cast did, which, I mean, understandably so. They came out with a really good movie.
Yeah.
So, another thing, another one-off type thing.
Yeah.
The director's commentary told kind of a full story, behind the scenes type deal.
Yeah.
There was a scene in the original shooting that had I can't really.
Oh yeah, we're both
Peter
getting
fucked
fucking
Klein.
tired. We're recording this at like 12 a.m.
Yeah, shoot. Peter fucked Clyde Peter in the ass with a monkey's wrench.
Oh my god.
You know what?
Yeah, no, I'm leaving that in. I'm leaving that in. Fuck
Yeah,
you.
I was Yeah, that I was about to say the same thing. Anyway, so uh, shit. Oh right, sorry. So in the original shooting, they had a scene that was supposed to be put in there where the the main character and her sister, I can't remember her sister's name, but Celia and her sister were supposed to be walking down like just through the city of Los Angeles, even though the movie was actually shot in Australia.
Yeah.
Which honestly was a really good choice because I'm pretty sure it would be really misleading if they had a scene where they were walking down the street and they had to, dodge all of the piles of literal shit. But that's a whole different story. And they ended up having to get the producer for the movie to fight with the local Australian government to shut down that street for the movie, right?
Yeah.
And he was explaining that it ended up taking something like 2 or 3 weeks just to get the permit for it because it's a lot harder to do it there because the whatever I think they shot it in Sydney or something, but it was one of the bigger Australian cities, and he said the city wasn't as prepared for that because like say in LA it's basically just everyday part of everyday life to have to drive around some kind of movie set or something just because they make so many of them there.
Yeah.
And then they weren't as prepared in that Australian city, so because so few movies, like it's not even prevalent there, so it ended up taking them essentially a month of the producer, like very tirelessly fighting pretty much at every second of the day for that month, for that essential month, essentially a month. And
Damn.
they ended up having, and he said I felt so, still to this day feel so terrible because we ended up having to cut that scene in the editing. So she literally did a month's worth of arguing with the Australian government for nothing. For nothing whatsoever.
Oh my god.
Like they didn't include that scene whatsoever.
That's fucking ridiculous.
I know. Well, but just the same way that he said it is like, I mean, we wouldn't have. It's not like we would have done it if we knew we were going to end up cutting the scene. Like we legitimately thought we were going to use it. It's like I mean, if I had a crystal ball to tell me like which ones we were going to use, I totally would have been like, hey, I don't care. Like, even with all the money that we would have lost, I would have told them, I don't care. We're not going to use it. So we'll freaking take that loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which okay, in in for the sake of complete honesty, some of this might be a little stretch because, mind you, it has been a really long while since I got to watch the commentary for the director's commentary because I didn't get a chance to before we recorded this. Just so everybody knows, in case they go back to look at it and they're like, "Hey, you lied." No, I didn't. I just didn't remember.
Or you're
But
like
it's
just are you like Joe Rogan? You just like spread misinformation because you don't remember exactly what went on.
yeah, dude. Basically, dude, I could. Okay, we need to skip over that. I could go on a whole freaking tangent about Joe Rogan.
All right, yeah, let's skip over that.
But short answer is yes, and I really like Joe Rogan.
Oh, I do too.
So yeah, dude, he's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Even though he is a Bernie bro. Let's cut
Anyways.
that out.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah. So, um, FYI, this is my last note. So I guess, like, if we want to end here, I suppose we can.
I mean, if it's your last note, then I'm willing to end here.
Okay. So, the scene where I cannot remember the guy's name. It always annoys me, even though I forget literally every single time. But the
So,
sorry, I had the burp and then it went away, and it was a horror. It was a whole ordeal.
damn.
Based. But the scene where that the father's daughter, like right after the whole psychiatric, which I know I'm skipping over almost an hour's worth of content, but honestly, I didn't have a lot to say about pretty much any time after they had the scene talking about what Adrian did to her, basically all the way until uh, Adrian's brother made it to the guy's house to go and try to murder the daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I didn't really have much to say. It's really well done and whatever else, but like any issue that I would maybe have about it is pretty much going to be a regurgitation of a point that I've already made. And how even this note that I'm talking about now is a regurgitation of a point that I made, but it's just important enough that I really want to kind of try to squeeze it in.
No, yeah, I get you, man.
But the scene where the father's daughter goes to goes to try and save her. Well, right before he goes to try to save her, rather, uh, they kind of have a bit of an irony point because earlier in the movie, she goes and tries to threaten whatever it is that Cecilia is being paranoid about with her pepper spray. And he's like, Cecilia, or uh, and he's not. That's not dark. He's like, hey, what are you gonna do with the pepper spray? Like, what do you see? You know. And then I like that touch. Like Linnell was smart enough to kind of bring that back and just kind of put that wink wink moment in
Yeah.
there. That's beside the point though. The main point being is that was the first clue in my mind looking back at it. In my mind, that was the first clue where you had people like you had your first indication where I don't know why I can't get my damn words out. All right, so uh, my last point on the movie, uh, like the last big takeaway of it, the scene where the daughter's getting about to get murdered, like the Adrian's brother is trying to murder the daughter. The thing that was interesting to me, that was probably our first indication, at least for me looking back at it, that there were two people. So that should have been the first point where I really started picking up on that. Probably at the psychiatric, but at least for my really dumb ass comprehension level. Because when you go to look at the scene, I ended up going back to look at this frame by frame like 6 or 7 times just to make sure I was right. But towards the very tail end of this shot, like literally right before they go and switch shots, the
Yeah.
it'll actually show Adrian's brother knocking over a lamp like in the corner of the wall. So he's essentially all the way in the back. And then by the time they switch shots, the little girl is basically halfway across the hallway, which, I mean, I don't completely believe that, but it's still somewhat viable, you know, scared girl, yeah, whatever else, adrenaline.
Yeah.
But the way that she fell is very interesting to this because the way that she fell is consistent with someone that fell because of some kind of force stopping them from the front way rather than the back. And that's important because there's no way anyone, even a grown man like that, would have been completely knocked down to the point they would have made the lamp completely fall over all the way in the back of the room, essentially, and then get up and outrun the girl past the halfway point in the hallway to push her down from the frontwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So that should have been, and again, I think I would have caught that if I actually had it in my mind that, hey, there's not just one person. In other words, it's not just Adrian,
Yeah.
which that was pretty cool. Uh, Also, kind of similar to the Adrian immortality thing, I feel like the girl's dad didn't, like, should have presented just a little more mortality, at least from his injuries, because he was beaten into. Like, it's pretty obvious we were supposed to think he could have possibly been dead. And if that's the case, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have been basically completely fine. Like, what they portrayed as essentially an hour and a half after the incident in his office. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember him. Like, I think I remember maybe couple bruises. Like, I don't remember there being even any kind of bandages or anything. And I do remember distinctly some blood flying out from, I don't know, his nose, something like that. So, I mean, that's kind of inconsistent, you know?
Yeah, so some stuff, but not like a lot.
Yeah. And then the ending, obviously the ending, you know, she goes to him, which I will say, I did completely believe her charade at first. Like, I did legitimately believe she was going back at first. And then I thought it was more or less a thing of, like, she would go in and then eventually get the balls to kill him. I did not think at first at first I did not think that she was going in there with the intent to kill him. And then eventually I kind of picked up on it as soon as they showed that the dad was there, like, ready for to take the concussion, to tape the confession, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah, she is about to murder him. There's no point in him being there. And by the very ending of that, where this completely, like, flew over my head the first time, basically the first 20 times I watched it for some reason. Mind you, most of those first 20 I was half asleep when I did, because for whatever reason I would always fall asleep to this movie when I first
Quite
got
like
it.
I am now.
Yeah. I'm wrapping it up. Suck my balls.
Sorry.
But I really like the touch that I think she even walked out of that room or out of that house with the dog from the very beginning, that, like, caused the car alarm that woke up Adrian in the first place.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. And arguably, that dog is kind of the whole reason for that storyline to begin with. Because if it wasn't for that dog setting off the car alarm, then Adrian wouldn't have woken up and been able to get there barely long enough to at least cause a struggle. And if it wasn't for that struggle, then she wouldn't have dropped that pill bottle. And that within itself isn't what would have caused the movie, like the whole idea. If he never saw, if he never saw if he never saw her leave, then he wouldn't have had any idea of where to look.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, quite. I mean, I'm not even really trying to say that would have completely stopped the storyline, but it would have dramatically changed it. Because, I mean, a guy with that kind of money would have been able to find her eventually, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of I have. I don't know if you have any insight to add.
Yeah, no, I don't have much to add other than that. That's just
Um,
I don't really have much to say on the ending other than that that's a really good film. I actually really like the ending towards it.
mhm. I know I don't really have any complaints to that. I will say I really liked that ending was the one of the very rare times where they acknowledged that the damsel in distress and the guy that's helping her out don't have to bang. Like, you ever notice that? There's just a freaking stigma that, like, if they have a scenario like that, they just have to bang or be together or just something like that, you know?
Yeah. Unless you're like Mario and Princess Peach. Princess Peach has been friend zoning my man Mario.
Well, yeah, but it's not exactly like that if you look towards more R-rated media, Mario media, if you know what I mean.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure if we should keep that or not.
No, I'm keeping it in. Fuck you.
All right, sure. I mean, at least I wasn't flat out like, you know. Which, by the way, this is definitely a part you don't want to keep. Dead Meme Frog is into photo porn. Don't
Alright,
ever
we're
let
going
him.
to end the podcast there.
Um. So,
Any
do
ending
you want?
remarks before we end this?
Yes. Um. Which I haven't been able to talk to Meme Frog about this. I said it that way because I know it annoys him. Um. I haven't been able to talk to Meme Frog about this, but I guess I guess now's as good a time as any. I was thinking about doing, assuming this goes well, maybe doing like a horror series next.
Hey, that's
Like,
not a bad idea.
like kind of doing a one-off for the pilot, and if it does well, then doing a series will probably kind of help gain momentum.
Yeah. I actually plan on doing like a few like horror review type stuff, like in the style of my main videos.
Right.
Yeah, like planning on
Heck
doing
yeah.
like some type of reviews. Uh,
Right.
Probably on smaller horror movies, considering that I don't want to get claimed, and also smaller ones are way more interesting than the bigger ones. If I'm being honest,
Yeah.
like I'm not saying better, but they are more interesting.
Yeah. Bit of a suggestion. The Dentist. It's a kind of like a franchise, but basically like a mini B movie type franchise. Because I think,
Oh, B movie. You just made me remember that gym. That gym.
dang, yeah.
Bro, that movie
Which
is
I'm not.
so memeable. Like, there's been so many internet memes made off of it. Do you know how many people have read the B movie script as like just a joke?
Yeah. It. Oh God. Didn't I can't remember. Wasn't there a thing where like the bee and her ended up being romantic with each other or something?
Some type of thing like that. I have no fucking clue.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah,
But
I can't remember either.
yeah, maybe that could be a thing. Like on the podcast, maybe we'll talk about more mainstream series or something like that, and then like for yours, you can talk about smaller ones.
Yeah.
That way, we're kind of like covering a more base because I mean, there's the really big ones, and then slowly but surely we'll have to get smaller. But I mean, if we cover the main franchises, we'll probably still have like a year or so worth of franchises. Like it'll probably take us a couple years to actually get through all the really mainstream ones, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially assuming if we do a couple one-offs every now and then, you know.
I'm going to say yeah
But
again. Yeah.
okay, well, I guess we should probably sign off
All
before
right.
you turn into a complete mindless zombie.
Yeah.
Last thing, don't forget the instead of verbally plugging in my channel because I only have one video on there so
I'm
far.
gonna interrupt him. The channel's in the description below, his channel, and so is mine.
Yeah, there you go.
Alright, so thanks for watching. If you like this, subscribe. If you thought we were boring as fuck, subscribe. If you thought that we should kill ourselves, you should just subscribe. And, you know all those feelings.